Hey everybody, before I started the video, I wanted to do a little bit of a PSA, which in this case stands for pretty stupid, actually. You know how people rage quit their jobs, or like, if you've ever seen the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas, it's a heartwarming family comedy about a man who is stuck in Los Angeles traffic one day. The air conditioner's out, flies buzzing around his head, and he just gets out of his car and just walks away. Um, I did that level of rage quit to my computer. Like, I had the endless little like loading wheel, and something in me cracked, and I immediately was just like, I'm getting a new computer. This computer, I'm tired of it. It's old. It wasn't even that old, but maybe it was like 4 years. And so suddenly I felt so like, yes, why don't I do that? This is the perfect idea. And so I bundled it up, I traded it in, I backed it up, I did everything right. And then I went to resume the video, and I did indeed back it up, but the problem is I backed up the clips, and there were a lot of them, like little clips that I had compiled as a video. This video was supernaturally edited by me. I never edit this much. So it was like 200 clips and images and sounds. And so this is all to say, I had to stop editing it because I was just taking these little pieces of video and trying to line them up with each other. And unfortunately, the files all went uniform. They were all like, I don't want to talk about it because I am so mad. I felt at one point like I got to get these eyebrows off. I just want to shave my eyebrows, and I love my eyebrows. And so I was like, I've got to stop. And so I'm just saying all this to let you know that I just know that there's something where I maybe skipped a 4-second part, or I added I know I added something twice. Or if you hear me say the second part of a sentence first, that this sounds terrible. You could skip this video if you want. You know what, though? Scratch that. We don't need to think of any of that right now because we're about to check out Choir of Flesh, the newest game by Alex T. This medieval, gothic, cosmic horror about evil, the battle between evil and evil. This is a grimdark, insane, awesome game with awesome lore, some super interesting, slick mechanics. And we're going to take a look at each part of this. And on top of that, hot off the presses, literally hot, just like real Apocrypha, is the first expansion available for the game Apocrypha, which adds some new little complications, little twists, inverse Frankenstein demi-angels, the normal stuff. So you really need to stick around, check this out, because we are going to take a look and take a song. That's not a phrase. Let's do it. I don't ever want to live in Los Angeles. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Man Alone Solo Role-Playing YouTube channel. I am your host, Man Alone, and today we're going to look at a very interesting game. I think this is Choir of Flesh by Alex T. I think this is his best written game in terms of the flavor, the premise, everything like that. The actual mechanics of it also look very promising. Alex T doesn't have a set system, but he has some habits, some, let's say, standbys. And each game, he introduces some new things, switches things around. He optimizes. If you're not familiar with who Alex T is, here's some other games. Broken Shores, Caernethalis, Machine Gods of the Noxian Expanse. This is the... there's two of those. Salvage and Sorcery. Scrap Hounds of Cygnus. Look at this guy. Think about that. Could you fall from a building and still have the presence of mind to shoot a bow and arrow at a tentacle? I would freak out. This is the updated Caernethalis Quick Start rules, and that's one that I might play this week. Under Ashen Skies, which this I will never forgive myself, but BB has the other copy, and this is the core rules for Machine Gods. This one is the Void Spire territories. Riftbreakers 2nd Edition, featuring my dad coming out of the bathroom in the morning. Ruthless Heavens, Boundless Fate, science fantasy adventures across the Nalurian sector. This is just some additional stuff for Across 1,000 Dead Worlds, which was the first game that I ever played from Alex T. And that brings us to Choir of Flesh. There are others. As they say, Alex has written more than games than you have ever thought of, or he has written more than, he's forgotten more than you've. Choir of Flesh looks like it has just so many of the things that I want. First of all, it has the classic, expertly written Alex T skills, stats, starting character loadout. It has great advancement. The mechanics are very clearly written. And this one is a sort of medieval horror book, which is like, in terms of things I am interested in, medieval cosmic horror, solo role-playing, a settlement mechanic where you can like build your actual settlement, build new buildings, produce different things. Awesome grid-based combat. If you're not familiar with medieval cosmic horror, you really need to hop on this genre. It's just started. There's like 6 books in it, and I have all of them. Here are my recommendations to get you started. Mitchell Luthi is definitely a fave. I just got In the Name of the Worm, which is great. It is an extension of my favorite short story from his Black Tongue. And Pilgrim, which is a proper novel, is one of the best books I have read in a long time. Highly recommend if it's something you're into. And Pilgrim is what I was thinking about a lot as I was reading the backstory of Choir of Flesh, because it brings up some of the same ideas. And I've talked about a few of these before in videos. And by the way, let me know if you... I sometimes think about doing a medieval horror video. Are people interested in that? I'm not sure. But there is, in the intro, the idea of tohu. And this is an idea that shows up in Kabbalah, and there is this like Kabbalistic notion of these 10 vessels that the creator, God, tries to gather up nothingness into these vessels. And then these vessels cannot hold this, and they crack, and all these shards sort of fly all over reality. That's really a very modern explanation of that. But he then has to take this stuff, this form. It's not nothingness, like it's not creation. What is it? Ex nihilo. It's like giving order to this anti-creation that's there. So the vessels were like the first creation, and then the creation that we talk about via Genesis is the second creation. And Pilgrim, the characters of that story pass through this place, and it explores the idea of like, can there be a place where God does not have dominion, like on purpose, which makes it sound like a tax haven or something. But part of this concept from Kabbalah is that in order to create, there are these zimzum, which is this withdrawal of God, so that in whatever crack is there, creation can occur. And then once that happens, and it's like sort of shaped and formed. And the core premise of Choir of Flesh, the inciting incident, is that Revelation is true, and it's the year, 1000, but these angels descend from heaven to sensibly carry out revelation, but it's really not. It is what is prophesied, but it's not how people interpreted it. All right, so this celestial choir descends, and they start doing miracles. And at first, people are like, "Oh, great, salvation! Here, I'm ready." It's 1000 A.D. Everything's awful. The sick are healed, the blind see, the faithful are like, this is it, this is the rapture. But it's not real. The choir's song isn't redemptive, and it starts to transform people. And this transformation is where the body horror comes into it, which is one of the concepts of this. I'm also hypothetically a fan of that. I have tired out on that as I've gotten older, and I find myself sometimes watching body horror movies because I've been a huge horror fan since as long as I remember, and I used to love body horror because there was a challenge in that. But now sometimes I watch it and I just am like, ugh, like why am I subjecting myself to this? Like, what am I doing? But that said, it is far more interesting for me to read about it and picture that and think about like what that does and why I feel that way about just this like description. That's a more interesting intellectual activity. And it's because this choir, this song that they're singing, this rapturous song, starts to reshape them, and they become penitents, which I guess can be described as like holy zombies. And they are living instruments of like unending glorification and war. And the Pope Sylvester is like, even himself becomes this grotesque singer mouthpiece enthroned in like flesh fused into a throne. And because that's the highest, obviously the highest office of the church, and he's part of this thing, he says, yeah, this is holy. This horror is what everyone can see is clearly horror, is holy. This is holy. It's just, beyond our comprehension. So then on the other side of that, opposing the choir is something that is actually the tohu, or what's the Norse term that was used here? That's also a very similar thing, right? The Ginun Gagap, which in Norse mythology, this is an abyss, like a hungering nothingness. This is a contravening force that is sort of like feeding on everything. So you have all these like perversions of flesh on one hand, and this thing that's annihilating those, but also is annihilating everything, right? So it's definitely a hopeful, breezy summer game. I'd play it on the beach. That could be a good idea. And it's it not only devours like physicality, it devours meaning. So think of like the Nothing from Neverending Story, but like make it metal. And so then the choir is reshaping everything, and then this flesh that feeds is just uncreating everything, and cities are just getting like mowed down, entire regions. The Iberian Peninsula, like Andalusia, is just gone, and the land, as far as I could understand this, is like a mass of living meat. And so these are two apocalypses that are converging here, and humanity pretty much fractures into three paths. So there's those who surrender to the song, those who stand in awe, like a reverent awe of the annihilation of the flesh, and then the unbroken. That's you, the rare survivors who resist both. And this war of the millennium is this stalemate, because it's basically you have this uh, it's almost like a divine type of creation, what you'd think of creation, but in the same way that like the body can create normal tissue or it can create like cancerous tissue. And cancerous tissue is hypertrophying, proliferating uncontrollably, unstoppably. So yeah, maybe not the most easy topic of conversation, but I do think that the metaphor is apt. So many things like chemotherapy, radiation, there are so many things in medicine that you apply them to the body as a medicine, but in any other context, they would be like poison. And what I mean by that is like, well, chemotherapy is a good example, even putting isopropyl alcohol on a wound, but also things like immune suppressants or um, like psychiatric medications, antipsychotics. You're lowering a level of dopamine in a person to prevent this sort of psychosis, and then you can lower it to the point that this low dopamine causes these Parkinsonian side effects, because that's like what Parkinson's is. And so you could have all these movement disorders, and then you have to give things to prevent those side effects, and then this causes an increase in dopamine. So the point, I'm not trying to like rail against modern medicine or anything like that. The point I'm saying is that we are constantly engaged in this eternal, well, it could be called, I guess, the eternal travail, which is the word, I believe, yeah, the endless travail uses to describe the loop of gameplay where we're always trying to get things right. And I think this is, and I could make a whole other video about this, I think this is one of the subconscious reasons that we are motivated to play games in our lives, is because it is one of the few places where we can actually achieve some measure of objective balance. But that's for another video. Let's talk about the gameplay loop. So one of the things I do really appreciate and that I'm looking forward to is this settlement phase, where whenever we return from a location, we are going to resolve a settlement phase. And so this will be like determining first like our scale. So we have a population, we have a number of structures, and there's a settlement size table that confirms like what's the current category of it. Is it a farmstead, a commune? What's the one word that I never heard in my life? A thorp. And then you pay upkeep, like 1 food, 1 water for 5 people. If you don't hit that, there's discontent. Then you have to pay upkeep, or else it's disabled during the phase. You don't have to do this part, and specifically it's stated that if you're playing solo, you can skip that whole phase, as it might be a little bit difficult to meet those objectives. But we'll see if we have to scale it, how difficult it is to upkeep the upkeep. And then we track like these unmet needs, which I think is mostly going to be discontent, but also the renown, and you can gain or lose population accordingly. I think it's based on a ratio of like acclaim and renown. And gathering resources, you roll a d6 equal to sort of capture what is happening when you're not there, what the other citizens are doing. There's a gathering efficiency. So you roll a number of d6 equal to that. Each 6 gives you 1 resource that you can choose, that is then boosted by structures. If you've played any 4X games, this is somewhat of a good analog simulation of that. And you could build improvements, spend your resources up to, I think it's, max spending per phase. And then you can stockpile across phases. And then there's a random event. And again, you can skip this whole phase if you want to. I certainly hope that it does or can be managed on solo play, because I think this is one of the things that I'm really, really looking forward to. And there is a combat grid for solo. And then I think there's a multiplayer one that it wouldn't be used for us, but I thought I printed it out just for comparison. And then you have overland exploration. So between settlement phases, you're going to move around using exploration turns and gather rumors, which, as I always say, rumors are the best things to have in solo games. They give us meat to chew into without committing us to anything. You move around using these what are they, exploration turns, and you gather rumors that you eventually spend to generate dungeons or locations. So the more rumors you get, the more you're going to be able to find things. And it's made up of points. There's a point crawl. Each time you enter a point, you roll a d10, 1 to 5. You have an encounter, 1 to 3, a ruined landmark, 4, a natural feature, 5, area of corruption, 6, a fork in the road. But every time you enter a point, whether you had visited before or not, roll a d10, 1 to 5 means you encounter. And there's a table for that. Wonderful, wonderful tables. There's also this whole combination of tables, a page of all stigmata. So yeah, you'll day is basically 4 exploration turns, and you can use those to travel from one point to another. You can hunt or forage. I think that's an intelligence check. You can rest. You can gather rumors, which is presence. I think on success you get 2 rumors, and on fail you get 1. And you have to sleep at least 1 exploration turn, so about like 6 hours per day, or you get fatigued, and you have to eat at least 1 ration, or else you're starved. Crossing corruption, or an area of corruption, is kind of a special phase, but that costs a lot more exploration turns, and you have to roll to determine if that corruption is the flesh that feeds or the choir. I love this one. I'm not going to say why. There's a taint track. You track your taint, and once per area, you roll on the corruption event table. That would be if it's a corruption area. I don't know. Yeah, different terrain features, injuries, the general action theme table, landmark natural features, different survivors, which is a really cool effect. I'm glad they added that. Encounters, servants of the choir, creatures of the flesh, consequences of the journey, what is the corruption source, enemy generators, scavenging, which is oh man, there's such a great scavenging table, and then 3 whole pages of like stuff that you can find, as well as looting. So lots of fun to be had. Honestly, this is like my ideal version of this type of solo game. Not in every way. Not in every way, but in a lot of ways. There are some areas of dissonance for me. There's like especially around some of the combat system that we'll talk about. There's a dissonance in that it's not the type of approach that I prefer. And so because of that, I have a hard time like assessing it objectively and seeing like if I did like this aspect of combat in this way, would I like this, etc. We'll get into that. But one of the things I did want to point out that I think is yet another thing that makes it really special. I talked about the incursion, and when I first saw this, and it was like that incursion sheet was with the combat grid and the settlement sheets and the additional materials, and so I thought that this was kind of a tower defense thing, which I think would be cool. But what this actually is the endless travail is that you are going to have this gameplay loop that you could play forever, right? But here's what makes that special, because I do like, as I stated, I do like when games do that. I like when they have something that allows me to make my campaign, my gameplay experience as big or as small as I want, as long or as compact as I want. But one thing that does happen on a long enough timeline is if there's not opportunities to introduce variety, intrigue, and really specificity, if there's no specificity, right? It's kind of like if you take away all of the incentives for playing a board game, right? Competitiveness, interaction with family and friends, all of those things that, let's just say, the things that make people play Monopoly throughout their lives, right? If you strip away those things, then you just go around the Monopoly board, and you're like, you're not, at 30 years into playing, you're not going to be like, oh, Park Place is here today. That's right. I forgot that Park Place is right before Boardwalk. Like, you're not surprised and delighted by anything, but that's okay because there are other things that motivate people playing board games. But um, one of the reasons that I think solo RPGs have lasting power is because there is this possibility to introduce divergent ideas. The tools that we use are so that we can more easily randomize those things. That being said, sometimes I feel that a good mixture of like, what's the phrase that's actually used in RPGs? Like, I always call them set pieces, but they're actually keyed locations. Keyed locations, if that's all there is, and by that I mean like a location on a map that is preset, right? This is honestly the norm in most tabletop role playing. It is only in solo play where we see an imbalance of randomized locations. But in most tabletop role playing games, like when you're traveling around the world in D&D, you might have randomized NPC encounters. You will have randomized combat, but it's more rare that you're going to have like a completely randomized city or village. You could, or you could have a set village that has randomized pieces to it, but for the most part, there are keyed locations. Like they are described. This is what adventure and setting books are for. And so usually I say, you don't need it for solo play. You just need some good oracles, some good tools so you can set those things up. But as I have come to find, if we can get some set pieces, things that are developed in accordance with the lore that emerge from the mind of the author, those are sugar and cream in your tea, right? Because you don't need them to have the tea, but sometimes you want an English tea, right? You want something that's creamy and sweet. And so this is really what I think sets Choir of Flesh apart, right? Because we do have this rumor system. If you collect enough, it sort of think of it as coins in a vending machine. And if you get 10 of these coins, we're abstracting the idea that we've talked to people, or maybe not. Maybe we have actually talked to a bunch of NPCs and stuff, but for whatever reason, we've gathered these 10 rumors. Oh, yeah, there's a village right over the mountain. Oh, yeah, the guy who runs it, he's a real hard ass. He used to be in the king's guard and all this stuff. And we get enough intel, and then we do this incursion where we actually generate these essentially barriers to whatever this is that we're trying to get to. It could be a new city for us to access. It could be resources. It could be loot. It could be a hostile takeover, whatever. But we're trying to make it into this place so that we can extract whatever it's going to extract, right? And yes, we have all these random tools to do that. But this right here, okay, you could look at this and say, oh, wow, he like named a field of flowers. Like, yes, thank you, Malone. That's a lot of interesting lore. You bastard. How could you jump to such conclusions? I'm not done yet. There's a second page, right? Pretty good, right? Okay, I'm just kidding though, because that's not all. This is what's special, is every single one of these 01 abandoned scriptorium, all of these are keyed locations. And I don't want to give it away. I'll show you this first page here. But you roll on these, you probably cross them out every time you go because they're not in any set order. So you'll still have to scale them, but look at this. Look at that. Is that unreal? Gives you the layout, the encounters, the hazards, will give you the main loot and reward. And it's just, you just don't, I think this is what's great about LXT in a lot of ways. Is like, he does a lot of things really well. And sometimes, myself included, you'll have like a main gimmick or conceit of a game, and then you'll build the game around that. And that could be a big success. I hope it is. My games I've written, and in many games there are. But Alex has like many tools that he could draw on here. He doesn't rely on one thing or another and draws up these different tools as is appropriate in a different game. So that's a really special thing. I find it unbelievable that none of these notebooks have perforated sheets. None of them. Zero notebook. Why? Why? All right, actually, I think I'm going to use these like paper towel thin sheets of paper that I bought 6 years ago. I got like 12,000 of them for 4 cents. And traditionally, you could do a point crawl on any sheet of paper. I think the way that Alex explains it in the book is the right way to explain it, which is like it's less like a satellite image and more like a subway map. So the only thing you're doing is showing, like, the only things that are important are how many turns are between each point. All right. And so there's always, well, it's how many turns are between them and are they connected or not, right? And so using this, we could just say that like this is our settlement, and then everything, every time we generate something around it, we roll a 1d6. And I think I just like using this setup here because then it's very clear. You know, if I if I say I need to get from here to here, it's 1 turn, 2 turn, 3, presuming that it's not an area of corruption. And then we can also label it on here. But you can very easily do a point crawl just by kind of going like this and then connecting it and then connecting it and then connecting it, and then just kind of like you could even label it next to it or whatever. I think that's the classic point crawl. But this will be easier for me to remember and also probably be easier for you to see. So before I go on, I just want to give a shout out to Grotesque Games, who hooked me up with this awesome flow sheet through the Black Oath server. You are my hero. And you know what? Nobody says it better than Enrique Iglesias. So, without further ado, unfortunately, I'm only able to use Enrique Iglesias images that are in the public domain, and also this is a song in the public domain, which is not "You Are My Hero, Baby," but it has the word "hero" in the title. Thank you, Grotesque Games. After several days of discernment, I've decided that the best way to actually go through this would be to follow through this wonderful flowchart step by step, because ostensibly this would be the exact process you would go through or can go through as we go through this. If you'd like to rustle up a character, grab the PDF, follow along with me. We'll go through it step by step, see where we run into snag points, and also from Gwydione, who has provided an excellent enhanced character sheet, which has drop-down menus and stuff like that. Now that I think about it, actually, this would also make Gwydione my hero. So I'm going to just set the center one as settlement, and if we need, the other good thing is if we need to make it bigger, I can just add a new sheet. Oh, that one's more vivid. So I like mark it here because it's just me there right now. I made like a little campfire and a tent, and this is actually, I'm not actually going to be tracking like the additions here. I'll probably use another one of these sheets. It is a miracle that did not bleed through, but I could use these for settlements, incursions, whatever. Like as I add different buildings, I can track them on here. That's what I think right now. As I play, this is how it usually goes. I go, this is a waste of time, or like I should do it like this, or it's easier like that. But this is right now a good start. We know that this is the settlement, and for each of these, we'll be able to roll a 1d6 to see what sort of terrain is there. But I think we'll start with just one, but I'm going to create the character and then we'll get started from there. And by the way, the incursion, you get like 15 incursion actions to try and make your way into whatever the place is, which I think is cool. It's like civilization. So yeah, and that's pretty much the loop if you're using the settlement. It's like settlement, exploration, finding rumors, finding resources, find a place, you can do an incursion, corruption will lengthen it, you're going to have different loot, and you're pretty much trying to build up this settlement. If you're not doing this, I guess it's mostly about exploration. In which case, I wonder if we'd have to adjust things like hunger, etc. But we can go over that. Let's talk about character creation. So these gameplay procedures are part of the PDF document that you will download. They're incredible. There's like these and the tables together. It has to be like 40 pages. We're going to roll 4d6 for each. Drop the lowest: strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, will, and presence. Willpower, presence. They are derived. Each of them will get a modifier. And then our anguish starts at 0 and our humanity at 20, and that will change as we make choices. Carrying capacity is strength. Defense rating is dex plus armor. Initiative is dex. Vigor equal to your constitution and willpower. Move starts at 2, and you start with 1 weapon and 1 armor proficiency. We get to choose that. And then you can pick 1 feat, something you've done that you'd be like sort of known for, renowned for. And then you can roll up to 3 times on the drawback table, and for each of those, you choose a new feat. And the like, don't be a punk, okay? Do 3 drawbacks and get 3 feats, because with 3 feats, you can run. Pick 4 skills. If you have an attribute with a score of 16 or higher, you can pick an additional skill from the ones available. You can forgo 1 skill and pick a gift of the unmade instead. This blessing comes with no stigmata. I think that's a holiday deal. Roll on a sin that defines you: your shard of the old world, a whisper of doom, a former occupation, an additional skill. And you can roll randomly. I already did that. I got Jorma. And then you can also determine your character's bond with another. We'll see if an NPC is worth it. We talked about the settlement. I probably could have read right from there. So a lot of these will look familiar to solo players. Yes, no, oracle, complication, surprise events. This is a nice surprise table, action and theme tables. All of this is on a D100. Significance table, that's good. This is more of the history of everything. And this is the endless travail. Combat. All right. All right, so first things first, there are 2 types of checks in the game. Really, the first one is just a standard check that doesn't shift according to difficulty. Probably, unless you are like really bothered by having to adjust a target number, you probably want to use the dynamic target numbers here. Although, I don't know, I've thought about this, and like, this seems like either this is a highly improved way of doing target numbers, or like modifiers should already do this with a static target number. But whatever it is, this is the one you're going to want to use for this game, because what you'll do is you'll figure out all of your modifiers. All right. So if you have you have a +1 dex, right? You're trying to jump across a chasm or something like that. With a +1 total modifier, and that would be very simple, right? Because you'd probably have like stuff that was going against you. Maybe if there's a strong wind, it would be -1, so it'd be at 0, whatever. But at +1, if you say the chasm is quite wide, it's a hard jump, and so you'd roll D20, and you'd have to meet or beat 14. I believe it is meet or beat, but it's D20 roll over. Is it meet? Yeah, actually, it says it on the core procedures, but it doesn't actually say it in the book. But yeah, you would want to meet or beat that target number. So that's a dynamic check, which is the default, and then there's static checks, which basically you just decide whether it's difficult or how difficult it is, and then use that target number. And then you have humanity and anguish. much like the dynamic check adjustment, I also feel like this is something that is working in two directions. It's a little hard for me to parse out. Maybe I need to think about it more, but essentially, you start with a humanity score of 20, and this score is dropped um, whenever you have like a blessing of the flesh, you witness or commit true horrors, and then there's these different effects of low humanity, um, which like at different thresholds, like 15 to 19, none. You suffer nightmares, but no mechanical penalties. 10 to 14, -1 burden to social checks. 5 to 9, -2 burden. And then at 0, you become an NPC, a penitent or unmade. And then anguish starts at 0 and increases throughout the game. So you gain anguish when you witness the impossible, suffer 3 major injuries in a single confrontation, encounter a creature, acquire the flesh, betrayal, personal failure, spiritual violation, etc. And so this is something that accrues over the game. For both of these, there are ways to either recover it or decrease it or whatever it might be. It's a little easier to get it than to lose it in both situations. I guess what's confusing to me is like why there are two systems, and if the answer to that is like, well, they measure different things, they don't feel distinct enough for me. Like I'm losing my humanity, um, and I can also gain anguish by encountering a creature of the flesh or a spiritual violation. Those are things that seem like I would also lose my humanity for that. And I wonder why it's not just like, maybe it could go from -20 to 20, but I think a simpler way to do this rather than having two running scales, and I must say this is me thinking out loud right here. I may encounter something mechanically that explains this, but there might be something where distinctly those checks like have certain usefulnesses in different cases. But to me, I feel like I could, rather than saying what's my anguish score, what's my humanity score, I could say, okay, um, what's my humanity? Have I gained a point of anguish or have I gained a point of humaneness or something like that? And then just kind of move it in whatever direction it goes so that it's like a meter, because I could imagine certain circumstances where I'm like, well, I've definitely lost my humanity. And that also was very anguishing. So I get the double whammy here of like losing humanity and gaining anguish. And again, if the answer to that is like, well, just choose one, then it's like, well, if they're that non-distinct, then why have both of them? That's just my thought right now. I thought that the grid system is interesting. And this is going to involve the placement of tokens or miniatures or whatever. There's like a little system for setting people up on here. This is north facing, so you would roll a d5, which is a d10 divided by 2 rounded up. And again, for the like, if you have a more than one person playing, there is a multiple combat grid, which just like extend this out to here, and it covers the whole sheet just so everybody can maneuver. At the beginning of combat, you have to figure out like how many terrain problems there are, or terrain what are they, features. And I had kind of resolved that the best way to do that was to just like, because it's a D10. So the idea was like roll a D10 and then put whatever die it is. Here's my little dolmen wood dice. So if I rolled like a 3, that would be, what is that? Impassable terrain. And so I could like put, and then you roll up where it is. And I say, okay, right here is impassable terrain. But I was like, that kind of sucks, because then I would have to look that up every time. And I may end up doing that if that's easier. But then I just like drove myself insane looking for something that had terrain features. I used to have so many things. And I went way back. Like I found these tabletop tokens. All of them are bigger than 1 by 1. I found these from like 5e days. And these are all like player statuses, you know, inspired or poisoned or whatever. These ones as well. I don't know if these, I think these are from like Forbidden Psalm, these little punch out ones. Those are also conditions, as well as 3 of them say missing sock. Then I think I figured it out here. I think the right answer goes all the way back to Basilisk. So what do you think of this here? First of all, this is the 01 grid, and this one is actually 6x6, but these are sort of grayed out, so I just thought I could use this for my 5x5. And then start right here at 1. See how great this is. Corrosive pool. All right. Difficult terrain. It's like a little crack in the floor. Impassable terrain. The whole floor is missing. Grasping tendrils. A big letter T. Writhing mass. A cursed idol. Alternate right here. This is also the alternate for impassable terrain. It's just like rubble. Soul echoes. And then 9 or 10 is cover. See the letter C? That's right. That was worth the 3 hours I spent looking for these. As far as, I'll talk about how movement and stuff works, but as far as checks go, again, so we roll 1d20, add modifiers, compare to a target number, meets or exceeds the target number, check succeeds. 1 is a crit fail, 20 is a crit success. NPCs and monsters never roll. It's player facing. Only PCs are going to roll against a target number. And the target number for solo play, we're going to have to figure that out. There are some, the book is solo oriented, but there are some extra solo specific tools for like narrative and mechanical stuff. In terms of combat, a turn is 1 combatant's chance to act. A round is the sum of all the combatants' turns. And when everyone has acted once, the round ends. How about that? Pretty good explanation, huh? Let me know in the comments if that's the first time you've had somebody explain what a turn is. Thing I mentioned about combat, and it was sort of a waste of time for me to describe it earlier because you didn't have key pieces of information that I'm talking about, so it doesn't make sense. But I'll summarize it like this. The combat in this game, crunchy. And Alex T likes crunchiness. And I like that there's something new, that there's a combat grid that sort of specific location in relation to the other combatant or the enemies, the NPCs. I like that it's on this 5x5 grid. Sometimes if a game doesn't have a grid, if it's just an overland map, I can play that as a war game, but it's hard for me to fully combine terrain combat with an ongoing story. Not impossible. It's just something about that has to be abridged. I played a game of Kill Team last night, 40K, and that combat had about as much enemies as like 3 combat encounters. I played for 4 hours. Like, it's hard to keep the momentum of a story going unless it's just like a sort of a vague overarching story when you're having 4 hours worth of combat to fight a couple goat men. So I'm going to attempt to describe the combat system right now. I think this would be a good point to do that. And then I will talk about what I think makes it really cool. And then I'll talk about the 2 ways to look at it. I think that's the most fair way to do it because truly there are 2 gamers out there and both of them will see this in a different way. All right, so just to sort of reorient ourselves here, I want to take a look at this starting in the top left. I'm going to just review our character, show you the base, I guess, build and show you how I got to that. And also the settlement. Going lone wolf there means that you just don't want to do settlement stuff, which is like, come on, this can be so fun. And we can generate an undertaking arc, or we can generate something that is more appropriate to the beginning of the game. And I'll talk about that. And then we have talked about the endless travail, and we see below the exploration cycle is 1 day, 4 turns. And you got to sleep and eat, or you get these conditions. Got to gather all your rumors, resources. Bottom left is really good. Just gives some very important page numbers here. This is a really, really, really good distillation of the game. And we're trying to get those rumors so that we can do the incursions, which is like the sort of one of the big events of the game. And something that's going to be a little bit different, which is sort of an irregular event, but a regular irregular event, is when we're traveling, we go across this area of corruption. And then to the right, we have combat, which we'll talk about now, right after we talk about the character. And the way that this breaks out is NPC, PC attacking. Just to say it now, and I'll say it again as it comes up. This is player facing. You have to get used to that way of talking about it. From there, I want to take a look at Apocrypha and see what kind of cool stuff is in here. But between this and that, we'll talk about my thoughts on the combat system. But I wanted to describe it first before I start giving my feedback on it. All right, so creating your Unbroken. This is, when you read this here, it looks pretty simple, but let me tell you, it is pretty simple. I had left just a few things out that I think are really going to flavor the character, and I thought it would be fun just to kind of see some options here. But just to go over my Jorma here, this is Jorma level 1, obviously. And again, the stats are derived. The modifiers for them are derived. So you can see like my strength is 13. That's a +1. And if it was 1 less at 12, it would be a 0. Whereas my constitution is 16. That's a +3. And luckily, I didn't have anything lower than 9. And the way, again, we derive all these is we roll 4d6, take out the lowest die, or I guess whatever die you want. If you want to play on hard mode, that's interesting. And then you assign those. And the most OP stat is dexterity, at least from the beginning, because it's going to feed into your initiative and your defense rating. I would say this one is pretty good. All things considered, I'm not subtracting anything. My defense rating is going to be my dex mod again, plus my armor, so overall is 1. And we see under that my major and minor injury track. And I'm going to be accruing trauma. That is going to be a cumulative thing. And keep that in mind, that word cumulative, because this is really a big important thing in this game. In fact, I thought about this drinking game that we used to play in college, water, of course, and the game was very simple in that every time it was your turn, you made a rule, and it was a very simple rule. But obviously, as the game went on and people kept drinking, it became more and more impossible to actually follow that rule. And whenever you caught somebody breaking that rule, they had to drink, right? And not only were you getting more into your cups as time went on, but all of those rules stacked on top of each other did make it quite challenging. And so for me, the kind of like litmus test for a game like this, which is a little bit crunchy. It's not a complicated game, but I think it's a game that you have to be open to a level of complexity. It's going to have complexity to it, and it's going to have things where you have multiple phenomena acting on your character's outcome at all times. Like This is definitely a game where if you got dealt a killing blow and you kind of sat there for like 20 minutes and tried to like figure out anything you could do to avoid getting killed, you'd probably figure something out. You'd be like, "Oh yeah, I have this thing that I got and I could use it once." And like whereas, you know, a game like I don't know, Cairn Into the Odd, Tunnel Goons, it's like you're looking at your sheet, you're not going to find anything unless you literally find on the back of your sheet like, oh yeah, plus 20 to everything, which I've found that. I mean, I wrote it, but so we then see my weapon, all right? And the total attack bonus here is nothing because really um the attack bonus uh, from what I can see, most weapons you get are probably going to be no bonus, especially early on. And I don't even know how we'd get up. Well, I know how we would, but it doesn't seem very easy to get even past +1. But maybe I'm reading that wrong. Alex is very much as far as conversations I've had and game philosophy. It comes from the school of thought of like what weapon do you want, and then you've got that weapon from the start of the game. And even if they're imbalanced, you know, was it Caernethalis where it was like, yeah, whatever weapon you want, some of them are better. Like, what do you want? Not every weapon's created equally, and there's some to some degree that is happening here, but there's also weapon proficiency, and my weapon proficiency was Maul. And so if we look at the gear or weapon availability, so right here we have a Maul and a massive long handled hammer used for driving stakes or shattering shields and skulls. Each hit lands with enough force to send an opponent reeling. Yeah, this is like you pretty much have to be a Baranthian to use something like this. And the damage type is bludgeoning. And this is also something that is important because most of what makes your weapon is not the damage increase. In fact, go ahead and look here and tell me if you see in any of these weapons um, damage increases. I don't know. There might be one that I'm not aware of that says +1 or something. And this little thing that looks like, baby's first square root here, that's rations. That's actually the currency of the land is rations, going with that apocalyptic thing. But the damage type, these are going to be really important. This is going to determine the type of combat that you're going to have. And in the case of like bludgeoning, it's also going to determine the type of injuries you inflict. So we can see right here on page 56. I think this is one that is just, you probably just got to flashcard this, right? When a creature suffers a major injury, they mark it on their injury track, and that's going to be this, right? And creatures, again, like some of them, if they're, what is it, easy, they'll have 2 major injuries, I think 3 minor injuries. And then I think 3 and 6 and 4 and 8, something like that. But this is really their HP. And not only that, it's going to determine their random behavior as enemies based on how well they're doing, which is abstracted through how many injuries they have. And they have a higher chance of um, doing a wild attack, a desperate attack, which could be a big hit or a big miss, as they get more injured. And then finally, the table expands when they have several injuries to include fleeing, which is not even a choice early on. So we have now this effect as well, attrition. If you look in the top left again, when a creature suffers a major injury, they mark it on their injury track. If they're still alive, they then have to roll the injury table according to the type of damage they just received. This is for enemies. And then when they suffer a minor injury, they must mark it on their injury track. If they're still alive, they will increase their attrition by 1. And I am sorry, this is actually um, going to go pretty much the same for both. And we can go through actually like a combat scenario to demonstrate this, but there is different types of injuries based on what type of weapon it is. So bludgeoning injury has all of these fun things. Um, and if we use prayers, we could have corrosive or divine injury, fire injury. Piercing is another one that a weapon might have. Primordial, slashing is a weapon one. And then trauma is a kind of panic measure a little bit. But we have this thing, attrition, and this is another dynamic balance thing. In addition to the fact that the enemy who's getting their ass whooped is going to be a little bit more reckless, they also are going to have a harder time hitting you and an easier time being hit. And again, that goes for you too. And that's just a direct modifier on your attacks. And again, it's all player facing. And so when a PC is suffering attrition, their DR checks suffer -1 burden for each point of attrition. And that's just -1. Right. So you roll a 14, it's a 13. And then we have vigor, which you can use vigor to lessen the effects of injuries by stepping them down 1. So if you get a major injury from an enemy, my guy to the right here, I think, has 3 vigor under the top right there. 3 times with that, with a full batch of vigor, I can step a major injury down to a minor injury down to nothing. All right. And it's done as a reaction. And then the injury track, this cannot be a casual accounting. And I think that this was probably a game where you're going to have a lot of enemies that run away. And I think it's one where you will die if you're playing it often enough and you're not fudging anything. It's a brutal game, but it's brutal on both ends. I'll say that it's not one of those things where you wind up with all your might and hit 1 HP hit. I think it's a brutal world for everyone, PCs and NPCs alike. And this, again, is the type of injury it's going to have. You roll on that specific table. A shield increases your defense rating. And you can do the thing of like, once you can throw your shield up and say, I deny you. And then the shield gets broken, but you don't take any damage. But then you don't have a shield anymore. And then this is kind of interesting, is that in order to flee combat, you have the 5x5 square here. And so I start here. In order to flee combat, I have to finish my turn on the opposite side. I don't think it's like exactly the same column, but I have to be somewhere here and then I can flee. And I have to flee and not be engaged in combat, which I think would be pretty hard. You gotta be like, huh, huh, huh. So there's a lot of effects, but even if we look at like the bludgeoning table here, bludgeoning table can cause the character that got bludgeoned to be stunned, sickened, pushed back, hindered, prone, bleeding, and in my opinion, it probably is not worth either of our time to go through all of those. I could talk about some of them as they come up, but really this is something that you're going to have to get used to, and you're probably going to be looking things up early on, unless you have an eidetic memory and you are virtuoso, or you are at a place in your life where every night before you go to bed, you are quizzing yourself to sleep, in which case, damn, I'm sorry, dude. If you're quizzing yourself on like conditions, I'm sorry that I'll never be as cool as you. All right. So all of these, you got to have some bookmarks here. This is something I usually, I have a physical copy of this book. I was in the PDF a lot more. So that says that my face is spending some time in here. I know that I will get more familiar with this stuff, but early on it could feel a bit overwhelming. So starting out, you can take up to 3 drawbacks, and for each of those you get a feat, something you are known for. I, of course, took all three, and man, my guy is pathetic. Missing eye, -2 on my perception checks, and then slow healer +1 every time I accumulate trauma. I then do +1, and then for that I got firm +2 endurance checks. Explorer, I get an extra move action. Skirmisher, I move +1. I think I was able to pick these. I did this a few days ago, but I think it gives, I mean, I think it gives the option to roll or pick. But then I got 3 for each of the drawbacks, and then you get 1 as well. And if you have more than a 16 in any of the categories, I think you get either an extra skill or an extra feat. But then provider as well adds D6 +1 rations when hunting or foraging. I mean, come on. And then my other skills: pain tolerance, fortitude, intimidation. Experience points are going to get you development points. Development points are going to get you more skills, going to level up your stats, etc. And then sin that defines me. Everyone has to have a sin that defines them. And there's the drop down menu here shows sort of 7 deadly sins plus the deluxe edition. And then a shard of the old world, I have a rusted crucifix, and I think this is something that has like it has memento usage, I think, maybe. Like it'll give you +1 a day when you really reflect on it or something. A whisper of doom. I was going to roll that one actually. 3. All right. My whisper of doom. Unholy ground. Let me look up what this is. Oh, right. That's why I left this blank, to remind me that rather than generate an undertaking arc. So in the solo rules section, there's this good thing on, if you recall earlier in the video, I was like, story ideas or whatever. This is generating an undertaking and a very good system here. And I see this is really quest generation, but a little more vague, I think, and showing the kind of arc of it that you could probably like conform to your rumor collection. But I see this as the daily travail, whereas I see the Whisper of Doom as like the pivotal meta narrative of my game. It's sort of the arc, or maybe of like several sessions or of a quote unquote season. I don't think I've ever played a season of a game, but I think you could feel sometimes when a game has sort of come to a point where you go, okay, I want to change things up or whatever. As he says, like opposite column of that, the Whisper of Doom is the doomed quest that gives the PC's struggle meaning, so use it to push them towards dramatic situations. So, Whisper of Doom, uh, you clutch a rumor, a fragmented map, a dying man's last word, the beginning of a quest that will almost certainly destroy you, but it is your quest. The thing that gives your struggle meaning. This doomed purpose is what keeps you from succumbing to the choir song. Right, you're an unbroken. I think that is really cool, and I really connect with that because I am unbroken. All right, unholy ground. There's a rumor of a valley, forgotten abbey, or a hidden island that remains untouched by both choir and flesh. Classic. The Bird Box. There's a place where Sandra Bullock doesn't have to wear a bandana. I forgot how that movie went. But if it exists, I love that. This is great. This is the sort of there's got to be sanctuary, there's got to be Elysium, something where it's like we'll finally be safe. Um, and then it's like the community you make along the way. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends. We've done this before. We love it. We'll do it 100 more times. And then this was kind of an interesting thing too, is that my former life, I was a monk. And I really like that. I like the idea of my dude like not telling anybody that. Maybe it gets found out. But maybe I like the idea of somebody who intentionally tries to put themselves in a life where they do not have to be violent. Like they're a person who is capable of great violence that could get a lot from the world through their violence. And then they go, um, I won't do it. And then suddenly something happens where it's like, okay, I tried to not do this. There's something very justified, right? It's like righteous anger. And uh I like characters like that. I like characters who have power and don't feel the need to exert it, because the power sort of innervates them. Um, Although I think this archetype could be taken too far. See also, who's the guy in Walking Dead, bald guy who just has like a bow staff? He's also in Fear the Walking Dead. And while you're watching him, you're like, just hit someone with your bow, please. You don't have to be pacifist against zombies. All right. So then, as far as settlement goes, I like it. It's just like crunchy enough. You, as far as I could tell, you only have to settle things up when you come back there, but you have the chance to be developing resources. But you also need to keep people happy and fed and upkeep. As time goes on, you're going to get more and more stuff that's going to have upkeep cost. Everyone starts with a large shack. And then again, this is really nice by Lord Gwydione. I think that's how you say it, right? Gwydion. And I believe actually you're not supposed to start with. I know that two of these are you start with 10. I think it's food and water. But on this sheet, metal is also defaulted to 10. I think that's supposed to be D4 like the rest of these. So I got the least amount of exotics. And I was like, oh no. But obviously there's huge potential for role play here with trade, and you could be under attack. And every time you go back to the settlement, you can get a lot of healing, and you can perhaps get some equipment and maybe get some help and maybe get some advice. But also you have to roll a settlement event. 46. A small group of D6 survivors stumbles into your haven, starving and terrified. They plead for sanctuary. Accepting them adds to your population and increases your renown by 5. Refusing them causes D4 discontent. Uh-oh. Let's try one more. 38. A mundane but debilitating sickness sweeps through the camp, minus D4 population. uh, Very mundane. Yeah, hey guys, I'm gonna go die. PCs must make an average constitution check or suffer the sickened condition for a week on all strength checks. So I have a 16. So I have a +3. All right. A +3. I died. Okay. So yeah, some of those. Oh yeah, I gotta name my settlement. So what is that? A D20? 12 and 18. Faith's Bridge. Faith's Bridge. Oh, you get a notable citizen. This is very cool as well. And each of them have a benefit and a problem. So my guy is a rat catcher. Check this out. Yeah, Odo. You get a starting settlement guy, a grimy, unpleasant man followed by a pair of vicious looking terriers. He's responsible for the dirty, unseen work of the settlement, pest control, and waste disposal. He knows every secret tunnel and forgotten cellar. If you get him, his vigilance is absolute. The settlement is immune to any random event that would spoil or reduce food stores. Huge. Potential problem: the rats beneath the settlement have been changing. Odo believes a flesh worm has made its lair in the foundations, and he needs help clearing it out. So you'd probably want to make like a usage die for that gradually grows in threat. An average check would have been a 14. So I rolled an 8 plus 3, 11. So I would have failed that. All right, so that I don't lose brain power before we get to combat, I'm going to do some combat, and then I'll take a spin through Apocrypha. just so we could see what's going on there. And we'll use this as the 5x5 playing board. Again, these are not included. These are the sidelines. You say, I got to take a timeout. And as far as the minis, I'm going to use one of these little guys that I painted up for Yafsaga. That looks, who's a monk? There's somebody who looks, there we go. This is a monk. And I have a maul. That works. And for my villain, I got a little goblin here or something. We're going to see if there's any terrain features. And so that will be a 1d12. And I rolled a 6. And a 6 is 2 terrain features. And so we roll d5, which is a d10 divided by 2, rounding up. I can go like this. Okay, so 1 and 2. We'll just count from me. So 1, 2. And then I'm assuming that this is the column. And so 1. So we have a corrosive pool here. And then we'll just do the other one right away. 3 and 1. So 1, 2, 3. Wow. Okay. So right next to each other. And now I figure out what each terrain feature is. And that is a D10. And we can do that. I'll go the white one is the first one. And then, all right, a 9 and a 3. So we have impassable terrain for the second one. And then 9 and 10 is cover. So the first one is a ruined wall, large stone, tree, some sort of flesh feature. This feature serves as cover and interrupts line of sight. So I'm going to put these out. Okay, so we have our cover, and that is impassable terrain. And the significance of these will depend on where I get distributed out on this board, where everyone gets deployed. But a good position to be, would I have a ranged weapon, would be right here, because I would have the protection of cover. It would be harder for them to get directly to me. But all I have is this simple maul, this simple 60-pound hammer. And so I am going to want to get up close and personal. And honestly, just so that things are clear, let's try to do this with the actual combat grid and with just 1v1. And before we get into deployment or anything like that, I wanted to look just through these pages right here to narrow down like what we actually need. So we'll need our character sheet, our gear, the stuff, the different types of injury, slashing injury effects, and then all the other ones with the injury effects on them. Counter difficulty, no major injuries suffered, 1 major, 2 or more major injuries suffered. All of these are included in the maybe zip file, or at least the group of files if you download this from DriveThruRPG. I believe with the physical copy, you'd get access to this, but you want to make sure that you have access to this regardless of if you get PDF or physical copy, because it's just these pages are really the most important pages here. And then even more excellent than the tables, you also have this packet of core procedures. And this is really incredible because it is going to really put a focus on every step-by-step of combat right off front. Tells you how to do checks. Then you have combat, injuries, vigor, injury consequences, trauma, all that. Exploration, incursions, we don't need those right now. Character creation, I might need that just to remind me of like what the different stats are and stuff like that. But this wouldn't be one that I would actually keep on hand if I were in the cycle of play. All right, so I think the best way to do this is just go point by point in the book, and to use an actual character. Because if I use a generic character that's just sort of average across the board and has attack 1 slice, attack 2 slash, I think it'll be better for us to randomize the character and then deal with the nuance or differences that come up. So on page 103, there's 2d12 tables for creatures of the flesh and servants of the choir. These would be like the enemy encounters, and they correspond to an enemy in the sort of bestiary here in the back. And so I flipped a coin and it came up as a 2. So that means that we'll do servants of the choir and we will have an encounter with 7. That is a husk crusader. I love that. All right, so the Husk Crusader, pretty cool. Just a sort of, we're once soldiers, knights, or simple zealots. But the thing is that they still are, other than the fact that their armor has fused to their skin. Hate when that happens, but that's why they're called Husk Crusaders, because they were wearing husky clothes. Did anyone have that section of like kids wear? They have to go to the husky section because you're big boned, and so they just wore those Oshkosh bagosh armor too long. It fused. Accuracy is 2, so that's going to be a burden of 2 against me, meaning that when I roll to defend, there's going to be -2 against that, although it's not the net modifier. We have to figure out all of those different modifiers and come up with a number at the end. Their attack is average. Now, because we're going to say that this character is easy, when it says that a character is average, you don't move all of their things to easy, right? What you do is when, for instance, right here, the Mater Dolorosa, the painful, what is it, mother? It would be, they have a very hard dexterity. And so if they are easy, like that's the sort of encounter that you roll up, or that's the level that you're playing at, you would shift that down 1 level. Whereas if they're average, we'll keep it where it is. And if they're difficult encounter, you shift it up 1. So the Husk Crusader is pretty average across the board, but what it's going to do is it's going to lower all of the average attack to easy attack, constitution to easy, difficulty or defense rating to easy. Dexterity is easy, so that will go to very easy, and everything else will go to easy, which is great. That means I think a target number of, 2. And it says easy creatures use the easy injury track, which is right here. This is nice for time as well, so we have some time to look at Apocrypha. So that means I will destroy them if I give them, if I fill up their injury track here. And it says have their stats reduced by 1 stage from average to easy and hard to average, and their accuracy reduced by 1. The amount of XP they grant is also reduced by 1. So we'll put the accuracy down to 1 as well. And so now it will become the easy Husk Crusader is 1 accuracy, easy attack, easy constitution, easy defense rating, very easy dexterity. As far as I know, their initiative 12 moved to number, there's just 1 of them. Average perception goes to easy, easy strength, willpower is easy, and their this roll, ROLE, will say melee or ranged, and that's the type of attack they prefer. Then their standard attack is Bone Blade Strike, which is range 1 slashing damage. Their special attack is Relentless Strike, which is range 1 divine damage, meaning we'll have to check out those injury tables should that come up. And their support action isn't going to apply. It's Chant of the Faithful. It grants all choir creatures within range 4 a +1 accuracy until next turn. Now, what I'll do for that, since we want it to have some effect, but he's just fighting alone, is I will, rather than having that represent his turn, I'll just give him +1 accuracy for that turn for whatever he is going to do. Now, experience is 3, but that'll go down to 2. And then loot, you roll on the looting table. And what we do for all of these things is that we just determine whenever we have to measure one thing versus another, when it's easy, we just use whatever target number, usually 12, is going to be the easy check, and then apply those modifiers, all right? And for instance, dexterity, that's going to be very easy. So that will mean that at least I should put an asterisk here, and you can let me know if this is not how you play, but you drop the dexterity to very easy, and that means the target number is 10. And then we do my dexterity versus that target number and see if there is any burdens, or I always forget burdens. I got to look that up. Right. Burdens or mastery. Mastery adds a +1 to my roll. Burdens subtract 1. And it's always my roll. It's always player facing. Now, just because this is the default way to play it, I made the table here, and we can use dynamic target numbers. And so after we look at like my total modifier, say that we end up saying that, okay, there's I end up with +1 mastery. We look here, and if it is a melee attack, right, I'm going to be going against the defense rating, which is going to get dropped from average to easy, and I have a +1. And so we go to easy at 1. I have to get over a 9. So I roll a d20, add +1, and I have to equal to or greater than 9 is a success. All right. And average, of course, right here. We can move up very hard to impossible, but I don't think I think I did this right. There's nothing that is lower than that. And so on our the very start, we're going to deploy, and then we'll take a look at the field of play. Now, again, these pages right here, 172 and 173, in addition to determining like what actions the enemy is going to do based on their injuries they've suffered each round, we also, if there were several of us, if I had companions or playing with others, we would roll that to see which which of us the enemy is targeting. All right, so just because combat has just begun and there's no GM, so we'll just say there's, if there was something that would strongly indicate contextually that there is some sort of surprise that would happen, we would say something, but we'll just do it straight up. And so we have to roll a d20, and we are just going to roll that d20 and add the initiative modifier. And for me, I believe that's a 0. Yeah. So the initiative of our friend here, I forgot what it was. Was it 10, 11? Well, I rolled a 1. And a PC that rolls a natural 1 for initiative loses their turn, but rolling a natural 20 grants advantage to the first check made in their turn. So that's fine. We could have me lose my first turn. That'll give a chance for our husky friend to get a little closer to me. So you can represent with miniatures or tokens. And honestly, as much as I love miniatures, I think probably a thing that might be easiest is representing it with dice. And that way you can sort of like put whatever relevant thing, especially if you have several different enemies and you want to keep them delineated, you could just use different dice or tokens, whatever. I mean, it's not all about practicality, but that did occur to me. All right, and so remember we have this cover and impassable terrain right here. And it says for deployment, if the player party surprised the NPCs, they can choose which side to deploy on after the NPC's deployment side has been determined. Otherwise, roll a d4 to determine each party's deployment side. So I think the way that I want to do this is use a directional dice. And I think if it's an in-between, I will factor things in, but usually it'll be like my choice unless I have a disadvantage. So right now I clearly have some sort of disadvantage. My initiative sucked. And so I will do, I don't know if there's anything disadvantageous, but it's south, all right, which is good. So I will deploy here. And because this is north facing. All right, combatants are placed on the first square row of their side. If the first row is full, place them on the second, and so on. All right. And then everything is going to go bottom to top, west to east. All right. And so if we think about it from the enemy's perspective, not only do I think this is probably where they would go, but this is actually, if they wanted to, this would be advantageous for them if they had a ranged weapon just kind of park there and snap up, because that would really suck. If this enemy had a crossbow, I'm lucky that they're ranged, because it would take me a while to get to them, and they would have at least 2 free shots. All right. It is crucial to know what each combatant can see. This is line of sight. To determine whether a combatant can see a target, trace an imaginary line from one side of the square to any part of the target's square. If the line doesn't pass through or touch an object or effect like a wall or cloud of smoke, they can see their target. If their line of sight intersects with cover, their view is partially blocked, which could be called vague. Check the cover rules on page 53. Whether you're calculating line of sight or taking shelter from ranged attacks, cover is an important factor. Range attacks suffer a -2 burden when attacking a target behind cover. Okay, so that right there is another thing that we would throw into that modifier bucket before we determine. So if I had a ranged attack, right, and say I was here, I have to cross this cover. And it is important, if you've never played miniature games, it is important to see what the directions say, where to measure it, right? Because for instance, in a lot of games, you would measure it from the imaginary center of your character to the center of the other character. And that would mean I would draw the line from here to there, and clearly this line of sight. But since it's any part of my square to any part of their square, I think in most, or at least enough war games, this right here would be a failed line of sight. But if I can do this from my square to theirs, I absolutely have a line of sight here. And so that's important. It's any part of the, any outside side of the box. Which I don't know. I would feel that it should be the center of the square. That would lead to more interesting situations, because maybe I'm just not thinking big enough. Like maybe there is some different configurations where it would be torturous to not give that level of flexibility. That's probably it. If we had like 3 cover sources all around, I think that would be kind of tough. We won't talk about area of effect and stuff like that unless we need to. But yeah, natural 1 is a crit miss. We talked about cover, and I am going to move 2 + 1. One of my skills gives me additional, so that's really nice. I'm able to move 3 squares. And it says all creatures move a number of squares equal to their move. And our friend, again, has Husky, though he is, I believe it's 2. Yep, he has a move of 2. I'll take a look there for a second. So it says creatures can either move first and then act, or act first and then move, but a character cannot move, act, and move again, even if they have movement left. So that, even though it says creatures, it just is a catch-all, I'm pretty sure here. So you can move and then hit, or you can hit and then move, but you can't go like, hey, and then move away again. That's the only thing you can't do, because you could move orthogonally, diagonally. You just have to do one first and then the second one. At the end of their move, a creature that isn't engaged in melee can choose which side to face at no cost. In melee, they will face their target. NPC creatures will always end the movement facing their target. Target facing. So I'll admit that player facing is something that I struggle with. I have not been too good about that, even like when I'm GMing. But essentially, the only thing it says in the book about this is that at the end of their move, a creature who isn't engaged in melee can choose which side to face at no cost. In melee, they will face their target. NPC creatures will always end the movement facing their target. It's only on page 52 in the index, and it says that. It doesn't say anything that I can see in line of sight. That's one way that facing usually affects things. Like you have to be facing somebody to, use line of sight. I suppose that could be the case with a ranged weapon. Like if I am facing here and there's an enemy here, I would have to face first before I was able to attack them. But it's also not clear to me if it is like if it's not the end of my movement, and I'm like this, would facing cost me a move, or would I have to actually move to end on a face, or would I have to just like move in the same place and then change? I don't know. And I also think it probably would be revealed in some of the combat move type mechanics where it'll say like, if you are facing this character, then this, if not, then whatever. And I do know that if I'm trying to escape or flee the combat, I have to get to the other side. And if the enemy engages me, I have to face them. And so that is relevant in that, like, I can't be facing directly in melee combat while I'm doing that. Please forgive me. I'm not going to think about that too much right now. I also think that even though we can use the tables when things are getting into it, at least your mileage may vary on this, but for me, things are often obvious. You know, like it's fairly obvious right here what's going to happen. This enemy has a melee weapon. I have a melee weapon. I doubt that they're going to go for their move, and I don't know if I have to use the table for that, right? So until we meet for our little meet cute, they're going first. They have a move of 2, 1, 2. That's all that's going to happen on the first turn because I lost my first turn. Okay. And then, I should mention, if they had any attack that was a ranged attack, I would roll for that. But I do not believe there's anything that the Husk Crusader can do. I guess a Chant of the Faithful. Yeah, I guess a Chant of the Faithful could be done. We always have time for that. And I guess I would give it to them on the next turn. Actually, I'm just going to advance because even that would expire by the next round. All right, because I think that this enemy has a chance to do a support action like that, but also, and this is getting back to what I was saying, that doesn't make sense to me. That is, we have just opened the fight, and if I was fighting a Husk warrior, as I have, and I will again, we're just going to be running at each other right now. But me, I forgot to tie my shoe when I rolled a 1, so that's why I don't get to move. And now it's a new round, and we are going to be able to roll initiative again. All right. And still, there's nothing now that is serving as a modifier for that, because my dex mod is +0. Their dexterity is very easy. But really, I'm just rolling it against their initiative. And that's all that matters here. And that's, as far as I remember, that's not the only thing that's affected when we shift them down to easy, is a -1 to their accuracy. So I'm going to try to hit 12 again. And a 4. All right. So the enemy is going to attack me with extreme malice. Now, I'll come out and say it. All creatures can make one of the following: 1 free action. Can we stop saying that? That I can, like, my character can yell? Does anyone think, like, oh, I got to check in this game, you got to be quiet or else you lose your action? We can do a move action, 1 reaction, which are free in response to another creature's action, such as disengage, which probably has to do with facing, and then 1 standard action. Self-contained, and the results are seen in the same turn. And creatures can usually make a single standard action during their turn, but some unique stuff allows them to do more. And all creatures can make 1 of each. So this character is going to do 1 move action, And they'll probably only take half of it. It's more advantageous to have me cornered right here. And now they're going to attack. And I don't care about their own dice roll. That's happening. They got little dice here. But all I am rolling for is to see if I am going to be able to defend. Now, their accuracy is instead of of 2, it is now a 1. So that is a -1. And because my defense rating is +1, that right there, so far, it's a wash. And that +1 just comes from my armor, my Gambeson that you start with. And this character, as far as I can see, it depends on what attack is about to happen here, all right? So they have no major injuries. We're going to roll a 1d10, and we'll just see what, hopefully they just do a standard attack. 5. All right, so they have done a standard attack, and that is the Bone Blade Strike. And to figure out what this does, or potentially does, we're going to look at these injury tables, because the Bone Blade Strike is potentially slashing damage. And so we haven't seen if they're going to connect yet. We don't know. But so usually you would do the attack roll to see if it even happens before we see what kind of attack they're doing. But I just wanted to make sure that we weren't using our time productively. So this slashing injury, this can be pretty bad, right? Across the eyes, the attacker damages the target's eyes. I'm stunned for 2. Parrying strike, the attacker attacks and parries in the same movement, increasing their defense rating by +2 for 2 rounds. That sucks. They can taunt me. They can gain +2 mastery on their next attack. The dented armor, the target's DR is reduced by 1 until the end of combat. That would also really suck. I would be at a -1 for that. I receive an additional minor injury, and then we determine whether it's a major or minor injury tallied by how much the difficulty rating is passed or failed by. So because it is straight up and down, right? It's a 0. Our modifiers as of right now cancel each other out. We could use this dynamic target number, and we look at 0. And because it's a melee attack, we are going to use strength, which average gets moved down to easy. And so easy at a 0, I have to roll. That's a 9, actually. I know that looks... There we go. So I have to roll a 9 or more to successfully defend against this hateful jerk. He's a jerk. I mean, honestly, I'm tired of like beating around the bush. This guy is a jerk. And if he succeeds here, not only is that going to hurt my body, it's going to hurt me, my feelings. All right. So now you tell me, come on. Remember, it's player facing. So if this was his role, I would be going, yeah, but it's my role, and I stink up the joint. All right. So now he did connect on me, and it's not the type of connection that I like. And it was pretty bad, because not only did I not hit my target defense number of 9, I came 6 under that defense number, and that is significant. So during combat, characters will strike at each other, causing either major or minor injuries. When it's a PC attacking, nope. When it's the NPC or monster attacking, rolling lower than the attacker's attack causes the PC to suffer 1 major injury. That's it. Rolling lower. Rolling equal to or higher than the attacker's attack by a difference of 3 points or less causes the PC to suffer a minor injury. So I would have to beat that 9 by 4 or more to get out of that with no injury. I actually like that. Because I feel if it wasn't like that, and asterisk, I'm stupid. I could be wrong about everything. I don't, might not even know who I am, but so I definitely got a major injury, and I like that because we're just gonna resolve the combat sooner. Because if not, I don't know how the stats bear out, but I just feel like it would be all of this stuff to get the same thing that we functionally get in so many games, especially if like Baldur's Gate was the first time you ever played a tabletop game. I don't know how people survive, because for like the first, and I only played about 5 hours of that game, I must have missed like 80% of my attacks. And so if you have no experience with this, you have to just be like, this game sucks. Like I cannot hit anybody. Although I'm that person who puts the game on hard right away. So I definitely have a major injury. However, I also am a vigorous youth. So it is going to be a major injury. All right. And now there's some other stuff that we can add as well. But just to focus on this, we know that this is a slashing injury. And this is right here a D8. And so we would be able to see right away. 8. I am sickened. And sickened always has a number by it. And so the effect is a sickened creature suffers burden equal to X. The effect that caused a creature to be sickened ends. So that's quite bad. I have a burden of 2. And the only thing, and this is something that I don't quite get, is like the resolution is the effect that caused the creature to be sickened ends. I would think that that's the end of the round. And so I guess what this means though is, okay, so it applies to my attack. I mean, that's all I can think of, because unless somebody is slashing me in slow motion, I'm sickened due to the hit. And if I had already attacked this round, I think it would just be over, right? So there must be some things that cause the sickened effect for, like, I don't know, toxins or something, and it tells you how long. I'm not quite sure. It doesn't matter, because I have 3 vigor. And with 3 vigor, before any of this even happens, I'm going to knock that down to 2, and that's going to downgrade this to a minor injury. With a minor injury, I don't have to roll on the table, but I do get 1 attrition. And what 1 attrition does is it basically adds like a burden, which means my rolls now have -1. I think if this was a real fight, I would actually not do that, because I'll take the -2 that sickened gives me. But I now have a -1 like ongoing. On the other hand, I also have a major injury, and I don't have many of those to give up. So, it's matters where you are in the combat or so. So I shouldn't say that I wouldn't do that. I would just say that I would have to sit and thinks. Now, I also, just because it was the first round, did not look at my skills, my feats, everything like that. But my drawbacks, -2 to perception, nope. +1 to accumulated trauma, we'll talk about that. Anguish, +1. There's all sorts of suffering in this game. My feats, I get +2 to endurance checks, haven't used that. I do get experience more. And I get +1 move action per day. And I get +1 move in combat, which is already factored with that. And this has to do with hunting and gathering. My pain tolerance, once per round, hard constitution checks can negate minimum injury. So I am actually going to do that. Now, a hard constitution check, I believe, means it's like that. I don't think it's with disadvantage. So I could negate the whole injury. And I'll try it. Because you want to know my secret? With a hard constitution check at, I guess it would just would be at 0, except I have a constitution of 16, which means I get a +3. And I think +2 mastery on endurance checks. Nope. Strength mod, nope. Self-reflect, nope. Healing, that might come in handy. No. So I just have this +3, and I look at this, and that means that my constitution check is 14. All right. And so I need to roll a 14, but I get a +3. And why not? It's once per round. And it was on the line. I could have gotten a 19 or a 9. I was about to say 19, but I cannot do. I'm just going to add into my treat basket here. All right. Okay. I failed. So I did get a minor injury. 'Tis a scratch. And my attrition is at +1. And so that attrition is going to now be factored into my modifiers. But at least I don't have a major injury, because that would be extremely embarrassing. But now it's revenge, okay? I do have a strength modifier +1, but we can just consider that gone because I have attrition, and so that's going to be a -1 somewhere in there. And this is where it's going to get a bit tangy, all right? And this is why I think I'm going to use, this is good timing, because I'm going to use this to springboard into the last thing I'll say, which is about the sort of system as a whole, and then we'll just take a little glance through Apocrypha in the members. I'll put up a members video of that, since I think this is going to be at 2 hours. So, oh no, that's cheap, right? I'll show a little bit to everybody, but the members, they'll see 6 to 7 more paragraphs. All right, whether I connect on this or not, I'm going to still go through the processes if I hit. I just want to see +1 modifier, and this gent would be easy, so we'll go easy. I think I would have a +0 here, unless I have anything else that is going to give me... No. All right, so we are at a 0, and easy, I have to, once again, 9 or more. And well, I get, do I get a plus? No, I don't get a +1. Unless, I'm thinking, my thinking has been, but I kind of want to make sure, is that I don't get that +1 modifier because I had the -1 from attrition, but now I'm wondering if if no matter what, strength gets added, as dex would get added for a ranged attack, strength always gets added for melee. Yeah, no, I would add strength, but then I would also add the -1. And so I missed. But just for the purposes of gameplay here, we'll say that for once in my life, I connected with a hit. All right. I have a maul, and it is my basic loadout. You know what? I did connect because I do have one modifier that I forgot about, and I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have changed the thing, but I have a weapon proficiency in a maul, and so I think that gives me a +1. No? Nope. All it means is if you don't have the proficiency, you're at -1. Thanks, Alex. All right, so let's just pretend, though, that I have any dice rolling skill. This maul here is two-handed, slow, heavy, bludgeoning, brutal, concussive. And in fact, I would need to have rolled, I think, a 13. Yeah, because I need 4 or more over to levy a major injury, which I believe you need a major injury to cause these effects. So the maul is two-handed, slow, heavy, bludgeoning, brutal, concussive. And so two-handed doesn't matter right now, only that I can't have a shield or dual wield. Slow, initiative's reduced by 2. Doesn't matter. My initiative was garbage, but next it would have been -1. But next round I'll do that. Heavy takes up 2 item slots. Don't need to know. Bludgeoning. On a hit, apply the bludgeoning injury effect, which can result in all these. We would roll on the table. And then brutal. Target's defense rating is shifted down when you attack. I forgot about that. All right, remember what I said earlier about this is the type of game that if you sit there long enough. So let's see what that would have done. So it would have gone to very easy. And if it's at a +3, give me a moment, please. It wasn't a +3, so it was +1, -1, and then it was at a 0. And so very easy would have put it to a 7 with an 8. So I did do the hit good. All right, so I exceeded the defense rating by 1. Rolling equal to or higher than the defense rating deals 1 major injury. Rolling under the defense rating by a difference of 3 points or less, I would have still got a minor injury, which would have gave them attrition, which would have zeroed that out. And then rolling under the defense rating by a difference larger than 4 causes no injuries. So that would only be if I rolled like, for a 7, it would have to be 3 or less. So I did give the major injury. And that is what triggers the roll on the actual injury table. And that is what is going to give us plenty of fun because I guess though I thought that major injuries also caused attrition, but I guess it's the effects of the table are more useful, I suppose, than a dinky little attrition point. So now we get to roll my victorious bludgeoning injury. 5, strike to the knee. The target falls prone. All right. And so this means now that they will need to spend their entire move action next round getting up. Additionally, they would have 1 out of 2 injuries marked on their injury track. Okay. And so after all of that, we would re-roll initiative and do it again. Right. But this is where I wanted to discuss like my thoughts on this game, this part of the game in particular. But I edited this video more than usual, as you could see, because I'm not very good at games like this, and I know that I call myself dumb a lot, but it's not actually if you have a hard time with games like this, it's probably not that because you really can't even take in a game like this if you're not that bright. It's about how I manage information and what types of processing states I am in that tend to provoke more joy. And I am definitely a middle of the road person, as I've said. I like there to be narrative enjoyment, but I'm not like that to the point that, you again, watching some of these live plays, there is sometimes almost no mechanics for an hour, right? Or somehow it's like you have all the right pieces here. You're in some cave filled with molten rock and ancient evils and everything, but there's some sort of like dispute that seems to be happening on the set of Glee, but it's like happening with these characters. That's fine, but that would be too bereft of mechanics for me. I'm a person that likes probably something like Into the Odd, Cairn, things like that that are enough mechanics so that you do get that dopamine rush, that things are that you do have to deal with the unexpected, so that things can't always go the way that you want, so that you're surprised, so that you get these moments of like, how the hell do I do this, right? And so games like this, I'm able to enjoy them, but it's an investment. And more, that investment becomes more difficult for me. Early on, when I started solo playing, you'd get a game and you'd be like, oh, let's give this a try. I'll spend the next week trying to figure this out. But now it's a bit of a process. And I didn't edit this part. And you might have been saying like, why do you keep this in? Why do you keep in like the whole like, wait a minute, maybe was it? Because that is a pretty realistic depiction of what my mind was saying. And I did that to illustrate, I think, the two ways of looking at a game like this. And I'm going to separate them by like doing these separate opinions on both, as if it's the only opinion I have. They're not going to be in communication with each other, okay? So, opinion 1. Let me compose myself. Opinion 1. When I look at this combat system, what stands out to me is not poor design. The opposite. I am blown away by this, as I am with so many of Alex's games. But I do see something that is extremely dense in a specific way. It asks the player to hold a wide array of interlocking concepts in mind at once, especially during combat, and that can become burdensome depending on how somebody learns and retains information. So brass tacks, the system replaces traditional hit points and damage bonuses with a web of conditions, weapon traits, injury tracks, situational modifiers, and conceptually, that is very interesting. In practice, as you see, even a single exchange of attacks requires familiarity with a surprisingly large number of mechanics, and let's even be more elemental than that, a large amount of vocabulary of terms, many of which don't resolve immediately, many of which stack onto each other, branching into secondary effects, resolutions, follow-up checks. This assumes a player, and by the way, the sheet that I was looking at, I actually like tallied these up, like all the terms, and I was not like liberal with I was counting up to do that exchange I just did. How many terms does it take? And I didn't include terms like attack. It's like everybody knows that. But if I include everything that could have happened, for instance, like bludgeoning, I included having to know what stunned, sickened, pushback, hindered, prone, and bleeding meant. In a real situation, that one I would only need to know what sickened meant. But if I do all of those, and then like you have other ones like a concussive blow. This was concussive. I didn't even count that. That was also that on a successful hit, I attempt to push or trip as a free action. If I count all of that, that one exchange, actually just my attack, that would be 31 terms. If I take out like alternate options on those menus, it's 22. All right. And so this assumes that a player is comfortable with that level of, forget that, not comfortable, that a player will enjoy that, or that there's a right player who will enjoy it, and that right player is someone who can internalize a large rules lexicon and apply it fluidly under pressure. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but what are we doing here? You know, we're trying to get into flow state. We're trying to immerse ourselves. And so for me, I hope I do feel pressure when I play these games, because that means that I'm really investing myself in it. If I don't feel pressure, then I'm just kind of like, going through emotion. It's like, I don't know, I'm playing Yahtzee with my boss from my like first job that I had. Like, I don't know. That would probably be some pressure. I wouldn't want to be the guy that went down to Jeffries from Yahtzee. Anyways, I struggle with recall unless concepts are grouped, simplified, reinforced through consistent patterns and processes. And so in some way, I can't truly measure this. It would have to be over time. But I will say I have measured, like, I've played many games like this. For me, I imagine that players who really enjoy that kind of thing, that feels like decision making, right? Oh yeah, it's blood. Okay, I can push or I can trip. What should I do with that? Oh, you know what? I could negate that with vigor right now, but let me think. What would happen to me in 2 rounds, right? For me, that doesn't feel like decision making. It feels like procedural navigation. And what's especially challenging is that the complexity isn't localized. You don't just learn the combat rules and then operate within them. You need awareness of weapon traits, condition effects, resolution rules, meta systems that we haven't even gotten into, trauma, anguish, enemy stats that function differently depending on the context. There's this whole, like I said, a net of knowledge for something as frequent as a single round of combat. And this isn't inherently bad, right? Like, this isn't something that is, I'm saying this because of this is bad. I'm saying this is why I struggle with this and how it feels to experience this. But keeping in mind, like, who cares? You know, you're just one dude. I'm not universalizing this. But for some players, it's tough. And for me, it feels like a system that doesn't account for how all these moving parts come together at the table. It's like, well, this is a good idea, and this is a good idea, and this is a good idea. And it's like you put them together, and it's like, well, just do all those good ideas. And for me, I'm like, I feel a bit exhausted, and I don't know if I'm getting the payoff here that other players are getting with that. And especially for solo players, you know, it's all on us. We don't have a GM to offload this interpretation or memory onto. I I think about it all the time. Brown, who is a GM for Pendragon, who I do the members Pendragon videos with, we played this past Wednesday, and I feel so bad for a GM, but I can't even help it. I do the thing that players do to me when I GM, which is like, what do I click? How many times do I click it? What does that mean? Well, okay, where do I put the number? Right? It's like I'm offloading all this stuff onto the GM, and it's not good. I mean, I don't intend to do that, but in solo, I guess in solo play, I'm just so used to like offload to who, right? Make a decision. No. I need a logistical step for that. So for some players, that density is going to feel really rewarding. For others, it can feel exhausting before it ever becomes expressive. And the difference isn't intelligence. It's not even interest, because this game is awesome. Like, so many things about this game, like I said, are just the right thing. But when it came to combat, I was like, gosh, I wish I was better at this. And it's a cognitive load tolerance and a learning preference that really it comes down to. And ultimately this does, like, it comes down to taste, but I think there's room for compromise here. I think there's some streamlining that can be done, some choices, some options for players who, um, I think some people feel really stupid when they say, "Hey, I don't really get this," and a person who this is very natural for is like, "What don't you understand?" Well, it's like, "What about this, this, and this?" And they're like, "Just look at the table. It says add plus." And I just totally get it. When you get certain amounts of lists of rules, you just get like cloudy brained. I can't, I start getting nervous that I don't fully understand rule A, and then I'm getting moved to rule B. And then when I have to put it all together, like this video, as with all of Alex's videos, but I do them because the games are so good. But I always tell him afterwards, I'm like, "Gosh, Alex, I'm so like, I'm so fatigued, but he's worth it. The games are worth it." Um, but I think, you know, in a way, it's not perhaps Alex's responsibility. Alex doesn't have a response. He has a responsibility to to honor himself and his wishes. But I think that's, as solo players, maybe we need to remember that we can. There's no copyright on our desk, right? Like whatever way we want to modify a game to be good and fun for us, we can do that, and it's not going to feel like, oh, well, I'm just like modifying this to make it into what I want. Not if you do it with intention. If you do it whenever it's like, oh, I don't want to lose HP, I'll just change that rule, it's not going to feel rewarding. But I think there's opportunities to like lower entry and execution costs for those who are less motivated to memorize a large mechanical vocabulary. And I don't think it would dilute the design. It would broaden who can comfortably engage with it. And I only say this because Alex does, I believe, considers this a lighter game as far as rules go. And it's like, if it was one of the games that was like, yeah, man, this is a big block of brajol here, then it's like, what are you going to do? Well, that's my thoughts. Who asked? And this is response number 2. And just remember, these two are completely separate responses that I'm trying not to address each other with. So I'm going to full conviction this as if I never did number 1. One of the things I love to do is to think about certain actions without the object. They all become funny. For instance, golfing. If there was no ball and there was no club, it's just kind of people that are just sort of like pointing at things on the ground with their thumbs. Or I really love the idea of driving in a car without the car around you. It's just like, I'm just some dude floating down the street on a couch. And one of the things I guess it's not funny, but it is revelatory, is if you do a supercut of an attack sequence in a game or combat, and you take away the sound, and you just watch people doing dice. And in a lot of games, that looks like this. And it's over. And I can't help but feel sometimes of like, couldn't we have done a little something more with that? With that, or could we just have not done that at all? Because I've got carpal tunnel, and so all that extra dice rolling. One of the most striking things about the combat system in Choir of Flesh is how much texture it gives to every action. That's a cheap word, so please don't turn it into white noise. That's like, I understand that's what people who want to talk about wine or art or fresh bread that will say, "Ooh, texture." I mean this. It is textured. It refuses to let combat collapse into this binary, sterile loop that so many games put you in of hit, miss, roll damage, repeat. Instead, it treats every weapon and every exchange as if it's worth it. An opportunity to be different than the other weapon, the other attack, the other combat. And more than that, it gives an opportunity for expression. And I think that the reason why there are such vast differences in how people feel about combat is because people have dealt with the grief of combat in ways that people deal with any kind of grief. Either they try to minimize it and deny it, or they wallow in it and can't ever step out of it. But it's because something has happened where we have lost the ability to sequence combat in its proper place of tabletop role playing. Either it is this extra thing, it is a slot machine that you play occasionally in the game, or it is just another opportunity to talk and have your character get out some nice quips and have a tete-a-tete while fencing. Mechanical, tactical combat is a way to express who your character is. To make a choice based partly on strategy, but also on what choice your character would make when they would go for a high risk, high reward situation. That's expression. And unfortunately, I feel like we leave the surface of planet narrative in combat, and we forget that this could be part of all of it, and it can still be fun and slick and interesting and head-scratchingly good. The sheer variety of weapon traits alone in Choir of Flesh, it opens up a door to such deep design space. Weapons don't just feel different cosmetically, and I realize it's words, but like in the mind's eye, they behave differently. They shape how you approach positioning and initiative and defense and follow-up. And if you do this now, you're exposing yourself to this sort of risk later. And just imagining multiple player characters and just the network of possibilities there. Choosing a weapon isn't about damage output. It's about committing to a combat philosophy. And it helps me to understand why Alex in games will just say, pick whatever weapon you want to start. Right? Because there is no best weapon. Right? It's not like when, I don't know if anyone actually chooses whether they want like nunchucks or sais or a katana, but in such a scenario, there's not one where everyone's like, oh, there's no fair. He got a katana. I mean, if I'm using it, they would say that because I'm widely known as one of the, I would say one of the foremost katanites. All right. The idea that a weapon can contribute or can be an opportunity for a player to show their player character their own combat philosophy. That's where this system really shines. Combat is less about optimization, ironically, in narrow sense, and more about playstyle. A player who enjoys digging into systems can explore how their conditions interact, how secondary effects cascade, how different builds emerge from the same scaffolding, the same underlying framework. There's a real pleasure in mastering that complexity and watching it pay off through like smart choices rather than just, I need to grind so that I can get enough gold to buy the thing I want. And in that way, could it be that this is the first game I played in a while where choosing my weapon proficiency actually meant I was choosing a weapon proficiency? Like I was choosing a weapon that my character is proficient in. They have trained with it. They are comfortable with it. It's no better than any other weapon, but that felt real. And the injury-based approach to rather than HP, it reinforces this. Nobody gets like blasted or hit with a flamethrower to the face, and when the flame clears, they're like, "Too bad that only took 20 HP off, and I actually have 73." They're gone. So in that way, it's it's not like Bushido Blade where, you get sliced and you just gone. But instead of whittling down these abstract hit points, combat produces consequences. Attrition keeps changing the equation of combat. You can't just go in and say, I'm going to just do this because the combat is changing, and with the dynamic target numbers as well, being stunned, sickened, hindered, bleeding, it changes the fiction and the tactical situation immediately. Fights feel volatile, they're dangerous, and I don't think a lot of other systems do this without inflating damage values. That's like one of the only answers they have. It's the Dragon Ball Z. It's like, oh, well, you're doing the super punch. Well, I'm doing the super mega punch. And for players who enjoy crunch, I have to imagine that a game like this is just a feast. There's always something to consider, something to leverage, something to plan for. You're rarely just, waiting there for your turn to roll again, right? Because think about that. That is the sort of like reality of unfortunately, and I'm saying this to both schools, if there is such a thing, of like OSR and the newer approach of sort of like heavy improvisational stuff like that. I think there's a narcissism that can emerge on a lot of tables there, where you're just kind of like, when do I go? When can I do my thing? And here, I think I could see people like appreciating that time they have as it comes back to them, because then they'll be ready. And yes, I understand with solo play, we're not really waiting for that, but it does reinforce a core concept. And it makes me think, because I'll often say, Mr. 55, who I do the podcast with, he always wanted to move to the next thing when we played. And I'm like, where are we going? Why is this activity something we have to finish so that we can get to this next thing? Like, that next activity will just be the next thing, right? And so if you're a person that doesn't feel like you need to get different parts done with, and I'm not denigrating that. That's a valid thing. Some people like the novelty of it. They want to move on to a new thing. But if you're a player that's like enjoys thinking about your next move, it's got to be a feast. It's got to be a feast. You're engaged with the evolving state of the battlefield, and importantly, this gives combat a narrative weight without relying on power of GM fiat, right? This is important because I've said it is. This moment is sad because there's a violin. This moment is intense because there's the streaking anime lines behind you. We don't have that in solo play. The violin only plays when it plays. That's, these conversations, and I actually thank you, S. Kelty, if you I saw you emailed, because we're going to talk about horror. Horror is a great example of this. S. Kelty wrote The Bleakness, which I think was a game that actually achieved some level of being scary. And that's the thing. It's like, it's not going to be any emotion unless it actually is that in solo play. You can't do this thing where you sort of like get yourself worked up based on the electricity of the people around you to be like, oh, we're having a spooky time. If it's not spooky, it's not spooky. Right? And in this same way, if combat doesn't feel awesome, it just doesn't feel awesome. All right. And I think if you're really tired of combat loops that feel flat, this can feel like a relief. Injuries linger, trauma builds, decisions that are echoing forward in the next round, in the next fight. It's a system that trusts players with complexity, and it rewards attention. And this isn't a design for everyone. It doesn't try to be. But for the right audience, it offers something like rare, and that is that it's combat that is mechanically rich, tactically expressive, and it's intertwined with a character identity. When you're building your character, it should matter what's the way you fight. I mean, there's a reason why there's so many quotes about that, like you don't know who a person is until this, because there are certain things that you find out who a person is, and I'm not saying we're going to find out who you are because of how you play Choir of Flesh. I'm saying your player character. We believe that this world is real and that the things are there matter. We'll find out who that character is when they have to defend their values or land or friends or whatever it is. Um, and so I think it's just rare, and for players who love getting lost in systems, this is a kind of crunch that isn't a burden. It's the point. It's not a it's the point. It's the mastery. Damn, I should have said that. I can't. Do I have time for Apocrypha? Oh my! In for a penny, in for a pound. All right. Despite the fact that this video is now creeping toward 3 hours, and I just think it's worth it to talk about Apocrypha, which was just released, and because I do think it adds some really cool stuff, which is not always guaranteed with like supplements and expansions. So first of all, from a textual standpoint, it changes the game. It changes it from, I guess, like a dualistic, choir versus flesh, dualistic apocalypse into a tripartite catastrophe. Basically, it brings out in the open something that was implied in the core book, which is that there has been active experimentation on the apocalypse, I guess you might say, and that the humans, who are very much cast as sort of these victims on the sideline, which probably most humans are, we find out that they, some of them have been capturing Nephilim, which, if you're familiar with apocryphal texts, which I think the usage of that is interesting, Nephilim are, I guess it's not apocryphal. They mention like sons of Anak, or there used to be giants that walked in those days, like in some parts of the Old Testament. And even though it's a very generous reading of those different passages, there has long been this idea, not supported by any of the ancient churches, that like there used to be giants, right? Like these Nephilim were the offspring of angels or angels copulating with the sons of Adam, or it might have been the daughters of Adam with angels. I'm not sure, but either way, the Nephilim are like demi angels who were giant. And of course, if you've also read any of the actual descriptions of what angels look like, let's just say this isn't angels in the outfield. There's no halos or bed sheets. They got lots of eyes, lots of legs. There's, I don't know, they're enormous. And there is this idea that some of the really huge figures in the Old Testament, like Goliath and Og, were these Nephilim. And so that is pretty interesting to bring that in. Let me just say, and like Apocrypha is an interesting word as well, not just because it's fun to say, but also because like Apocrypha has some different meanings based on different context. So originally, Apocrypha, well, if we want to talk like originally, Apocrypha was a Greek word that uh, apocryphal text, it meant like you're not supposed to read this in church or in a service. You're supposed to go home and read it. It's a private reading. And then as like the Council of Rome, which I think that was mid 300s, mid or it doesn't matter. The council, I think it was 332. That's what I'm betting, but I'll check later. They started to delineate like what scriptures were legitimately inspired and which ones were not. And some of them later, well, some scripture that is not necessarily canonical, it is deuterocanonical. And I love that. It's just like, hey, deuter canonical. But deuterocanonical means that there may be some importance here, but they are not, the gospels that are deuterocanonical are not like written by through the whatever it is sanction and direct inspiration of the Holy Spirit. And because of that, you'll find occasionally, I haven't actually seen this a lot recently, but there'll sometimes be Bibles that have sections in the middle between the Old and New Testament that are labeled Apocrypha. And they'll have some deuterocanonical texts like, what was it, Maccabees, Judith. There's Psalm 151. You should read Psalm 151. It's very short, and it's supposedly written by David after he whacked Goliath. David, he whacked Goliath. He took him out of the game. Yeah, he went home and was celebrating. I think it's Psalm 151 because he was drinking like 151 proof. I mean, you know, he threw a rock. That's a direct hit. Anyways, so we have in the first one the Pope Sylvester, no relation to Stallone, is completely in, well, he's in flesh, right? His flesh has fused him to the papal throne, and his mind is totally corrupted. And he starts sanctioning all of this stuff. And if you take this literally, this would actually present a real problem for the Catholic Church, because there's the notion, I don't know how much it holds up now, but it's supposed to, the infallibility, like papal infallibility, which is to say the Pope in their official proclamations, or there's a little dog barking, any official communications from the papal seat are infallible because they are inspired by God. And so if you had a pope that was completely consumed into this roiling apocalypse jubilee of flesh, it, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, if somebody is like, oh yeah, dude, like I am totally inspired, and they were literally fused to a throne. But then again, it doesn't get any more literal than the papal seat if you're fusing your flesh into it. Anyways, I digress. There is, I think, a lot of more references to things like Nephilim in apocryphal text. And this is the core piece of this, is we find out that certain humans were capturing Nephilim and like experimenting on them. And it is pretty it's pretty grimdark. I was proud of Alex. He went for it. The descriptions of what they do, kind of disassembling them and reassembling, and says exactly what's happening there. But the problem is that they wanted them to have something that the humans, like, that would fight for the humans. But these are already demi angels, and now you've like basically tortured and experimented them to the point of being insane. And so they are killing the agents of the flesh as well as the choir and everybody. They're just like destroying everybody. And it actually reminded me of a Warhammer 40K story that is canon that a lot of people don't know about. And I promise I'll be quick for those who have no idea what this is about. But before the Primarchs, the Emperor actually did create a proto-Primarch called the Angel, just called the Angel. It was not Sanguinius. And he was singularly created to fight the forces of chaos. And he was amazing and super powerful and could fly and had all these things. And then he started to realize, though, that humans were just so easily tempted that he followed it to its ultimate conclusion and was like, well, in order to get rid of chaos, we have to get rid of humans. And so he just started annihilating humans, and they couldn't even stop him until the Emperor created a coffin and basically was like, oh man, I heard there's some chaos in that coffin. And he's like, what? And he flew into it and it just put him to sleep. And then they stuck him under the vaults of Terra and he is still there. And that's what most people thought the Terminus decree is, but apparently it's not. It's just a note. That's anyways, we won't get into it. Anyways, I thought that was interesting because this is basically what's happening here. So mechanically, though, here's what's cool. So you have these periodic. Basically, it makes for like the Nephilim function is like this slow burn campaign scale pressure system because you have during the settlement phase these like attraction checks, and then there's this countdown clock once they are attracted, and then there's an omens table that escalates this dread before the impact, and it's good and stressful. And there is oh yeah, look at these features: broken protrusive bones and a distinct hunch. And so it's sort of like promises this largely uncontrollable catastrophic destruction because you can't fight these Nephilim. They are an existential threat. They can't be killed by human means. And so in order to stop them, you have to, like, I won't say it all, but you have to build an altar. You have to do a modified incursion to retrieve something called Spoor, Spoor, and then you really have to pay attention to your settlement because you need to be getting a lot out of it in terms of production, and it needs to be at the right level. And so this is, I think, a great addition, some existential stakes beyond combat. It plugs the settlement thing into direct, like, whether you succeed or not. I think the settlement stuff is cool if you're motivated to do that stuff, but if you're not, you might be like, well, why should I even mess with this? You know, if it's one of those things that there are things like this in games that if they're fun, you don't really notice them, but if they're not fun, you're like, basically I'm raising money so that I can pay for things that I need in order to, like, operate the thing that I use to raise money for the things. But this now gives it some meaning, some purpose, some end game. And so there's also a complete, rather than a combat scenario, I think this is so cool. There's a full, like, keyed incursion scenario, this multiply on the face of the earth. And it has a fixed 15-day countdown. It has, like in the core book, these predefined points of interest, new terrain hazards, and it has like this non-combat solution. So I think it's great. It's these incursions as like a what we call it, like it's a new way to die. You know, like a lot of games will say this, that they have these other ways of resolving things, and some like 4X games do it well. Obviously, you have something like Civilization, right, where you could fly into space. But we like stories, and so a good story, a good showdown, it's hard to resist that kind of thing. And so a lot of times it does end with like combat, because that's the way to have a showdown. You're not going to have like a social bargaining showdown, I guess, unless your game is like that. But um I think this is cool that it is sort of combat, but it's like you're dealing with this incursion, this invasion, rather than the classic combat. I also want to say I'm curious what Alex thinks about like why choosing Apocrypha. I mean, obviously it's like very thematic and on point, but I think in a funny way, all expansions are Apocrypha, because they're sort of like nowadays Apocrypha means like this might not be canon. Or I guess I would use the term Apocrypha to mean this might not be true, or it might not be exactly true, but it has like some sort of like moral value to it, or it might as well be true given XYZ. But it also is that like expansions are that, right? It's like, well, you could plug this in if you want and make it real, but it doesn't have to be. But even so, I just really appreciate that. Um, Not that I needed any more convincing, but this is just, there's a very definitive idea with this game. And I know he has definitive ideas with a lot of his games. But this is like the next level up of a concept. Like the first level of a concept is like, wouldn't it be cool if, like wouldn't it be cool if there was this sort of corporate or this interstellar Running Man type competition where everyone had to send their best heroes to this arena and you had to join. That's a wouldn't it be cool if. This is bigger than that. This is like, I want to talk about this thing, and rather than like building a game based on this notion or this gimmick, and just rather than, gimmick is not what I want to say, but rather than building the game off of like a cool sounding game, this is building a game off of a cool idea. And I think when something is more pure like that, it's always going to be more potent, more powerful. And I think this does not. This just shows that there is like a very real, stable theology behind this whole thing. And so, yeah, that is Apocrypha, Choir of the Flesh, available on drive-through. You should consider joining Alex's Patreon so you can get the third-party resources that we showed. It's a good. I'll put all the links below. And since it's the end of the video and nobody's watching, I should say something. So like some, you can't do that on television. Oh, okay, I got something. And I would never say this on a video, but now that it's the end and no one's watching, I'll give you a little bit of a tea to the two people here. Guess what? Solo games, like solo journaling games. Yeah, I don't really care for them usually. A couple I do, but no. I actually got one that I kind of like right now. It's complicated. I mean, it's nothing against them. I mean, they create what you create. God, I feel sick. It's long. I'm not making videos like that anymore. 10 minutes. 10-minute video. Shower. Who is one? Who is the person who got their YouTube name to be the number one?